Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all their support. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from the Commander's Quarters studio. Welcome to the show. Today's episode comes to you courtesy of my amazing patrons. Once a month, my patrons vote on what commander that they'd like to see in an upcoming episode. And the commander that gets the most votes wins. And the commander that got the most votes for this month is Chatterfang Squirrel General. Chatterfang Squirrel General is the Squirrel Tribal commander that many players out there, including many of my patrons, have been waiting for, so yeah, I wasn't all that surprised when this little buddy won the contest. Chatterfang is a 3/3 Squirrel Warrior that costs 2 and a green. It has Forest Walk, and if one or more tokens be created under your control, those tokens plus that many 1/1 green squirrel creature tokens are created instead. On top of that, by paying a black, you can sacrifice X squirrels and target creature gets +X -X until end of turn. Now, squirrels are a beloved tribe in Magic, but they're not one that has all that much support. Now, squirrels did get a decent enough support with other cards in Modern Horizons 2, but Chatterfang takes this all to a different level. Because with Chatterfang in play, whenever you make a token, whether that's a sapling or a plant or yes, even a food token, you're also getting a squirrel. So with this Squirrel General in play, you can flood the board in absolutely no time with squirrels and, well, various other things. And then with all those squirrels in play, you can control the board by just paying a black, sacrificing a bunch of those squirrels, and taking out whatever creature you need. It's gonna be really hard for your opponents to keep any of their key pieces in play once you've got this on the board and you build up your army. Oh, your deck revolves around your commander? That's cute. Say goodbye to your commander and try not to cast them again. And then you cast another spell that makes tokens, you get more squirrel tokens, replace those ones you just lost, and you see where this is going. Chatterfang is a dominant force, and it is exactly what Squirrel Tribal decks needed. So with all that said, let's talk about some key cards and strategies for this deck. First up, let's talk about, well, making tokens. A simple spell like Chatter the Squirrel can be very impactful in a deck like this. It just costs a green mana and makes you a 1/1 squirrel, and it also has flashback for 1 and a green. Again, this is a very simple spell, and normally we would get, 2 tokens out of this for 3 mana in total, but with Chatterfang in play, well, we essentially double up the tokens without doubling up the cost. But of course, there are even more efficient ways to make tokens out there with something like Scatter the Seeds. It's an instant for 3 green and it has Convoke, and it says create 3 1/1 green sapling creature tokens. So again, Convoke means that we can basically tap creatures to help pay for this, and again, we're going to have plenty of creatures on the board to do that because, you know, we're making a lot of tokens already. So most of the time, we can probably just cast this for free, and when we do, we get 3 saplings, and on top of that, we also get 3 squirrels. Because again, keep in mind that our commander does not care what kinds of tokens that we make, it just says, okay, how many tokens did you make? Okay, sweet. Now you get that many squirrels too. So we can even have some lands that can help us make tokens as well with something like Spawning Bed. It taps for a colorless, but we can also pay 6 and tap and sacrifice it to put 3 1/1 Colorspell Eldrazi Scion creature tokens onto the battlefield. They have sacrificed this creature, add colors to your mana pool. Now for certain decks that needed a land like this, that you have to sacrifice and pay a decent amount of mana into for some tokens can be very impactful. But it can be even more impactful when you get twice as many tokens out of it. Again, a card like this isn't really taking up a slot in the deck, and it's one that can produce you 6 tokens. So yeah, even though you're losing a land, a card like this can make a huge impact on the game. But now let's move on to a new squirrel card with Squirrel Sanctuary. It's an enchantment for a green that says when it enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 green squirrel creature token. And on top of that, whenever a non-token creature you control dies, you may pay 1 if you do return Squirrel Sanctuary to its owner's hand. So first up, again like Chatter the Squirrel, at the very least, this is 1 mana for 2 tokens. But this card very much has a higher ceiling than something like Chatter the Squirrel because we can utilize it a lot throughout the game. Whenever one of our non-token creatures dies, we can get this back for cheap and then recast it, getting more squirrels. Then another non-token creature dies, then we cast it again, and you see where this is going. But a somewhat less convoluted way to flood the board with squirrels in this deck is Squirrel Nest. It says Enchanted Land has tap, create a 1/1 green squirrel creature token, but again, thanks to our commander, we're getting 2. And 2 tokens on each of our turns is going to be well worth tapping that land. But next up, let's talk about Eska's Chair, which can help us out in multiple ways. When it enters the battlefield, we get 2/2 green cat creature tokens, and whenever it attacks, we create a token that's a copy of target token we control. So when we get this in play, first off we get 2 cats, and then thanks to Chatterfang, we are also getting 2 squirrels. And I actually just noticed this in the art. If you look at the right side of the picture toward the middle, you can actually see a little squirrel next to that tree. So yeah, it's like this card was made for this deck. Because on top of getting those initial tokens, whenever you attack with this chariot, you create a token that's a copy of target token you control. So whether you make a token copy of a cat or a squirrel or whatnot, you also get another squirrel thanks to Chatterfang. But now let's take things up to a whole nother level in token creation, talking about cards like Verdant Force, Guile Master Chef, and Hornet Nest. Verdant Force says at the beginning of each upkeep, create a 1/1 green sapling creature token. So keep in mind that it did say each upkeep, not your upkeep. So again, with 3 opponents on each strip around the table, we're going to be making 4 saplings with this, and thanks to our commander, on top of that, we get 4 squirrels. So yeah, if this sticks around, we can flood the board in absolutely no time. Speaking of which, there's Guile Master Chef, which can do a lot for this kind of a deck. Guile has at the beginning of your end step, create a number of food tokens equal to the number of non-token creatures you had enter the battlefield under your control this turn. And then by paying 1, we sacrifice a food and target creature gains indestructible until end of turn, tap it. So first off, whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under our control, we're getting a food at the beginning of our end step, and again, thanks to our commander, that food also comes with a squirrel, because all this makes sense and it's magic. Get it, okay? Regardless if this all logically makes sense or not, that doesn't really matter. What does matter is that Guile can really help this deck out as well with that other ability. With the foods that we make, we can sacrifice them to tap our opponent's creatures down if we need to. Or perhaps more importantly, we can use our food to protect our most important creatures, including our commander. So yeah, Guile in a way can help us on offense and defense, and it can make us a lot of tokens in the process. But speaking of defense, we've got Hornet Nest. It's a 0/2 defender that says whenever it's dealt damage, create that many 1/1 green insect creature tokens with flying and death touch. This is a huge attack deterrent for our opponents. Because if an opponent swings a big creature at us and we can block it with this, well, we're getting an absurd number of insects, and on top of that, we also get squirrels thanks to our commander. So just 1 swing and block can help us just fill the board. So though Hornet Nest will die, it will definitely have done its job. And speaking of that, we've got other ways for tokens to be created through death. First up, there's my Tonic Slime, which says, when it's put into the graveyard from the battlefield, put 2/2 green ooze creature tokens onto the battlefield. They have, when this creature is put into a graveyard, put 2 1/1 green ooze creature tokens onto the battlefield. So this one creature can make us an absurd amount of tokens by it dying, then the tokens it creates dying as well. And again, keep in mind, as always with all these, we get a lot of squirrel tokens as well. Speaking of which, there's Emrakul's Evangel, which is a 3/2 that has tap and sacrifice it and any number of other non-Eldrazi creatures. Put a 3/2 Kelso Eldrazi horror creature token onto the battlefield for each creature sacrificed this way. So this card can actually be kind of like a win condition in itself. If we have a bunch of 1/1 squirrels or saplings or whatnot on the battlefield, we can just sacrifice them and pretty much everything else to make a bunch of Eldrazi. So we make a ton of 3/2 Eldrazi, and again, because of Chatterfang, on top of that, we also get a bunch of squirrels. So this essentially doubles up our army and gives us even bigger creatures as well. And then even a simple enchantment like Golgari Germination can be very impactful for this deck. It says whenever a non-token creature you control dies, create a 1/1 green sapling creature token. This 3-mana enchantment can put in a lot of work in a deck like this. But not quite as much work as the Golden Pig for this deck, which is the #1 card out of our 99. And the Golden Pig for this deck is Ogre Slumlord. Ogre Slumlord is a 3/3 Ogre Rogue that costs 3 black. It says whenever another non-token creature dies, you may create a 1/1 black rat creature token, and rats you control have death touch. So unlike Golgari Germination, this counts all non-token creatures, which counts our opponent's creatures, which is absurd. So anytime any non-token creature dies, we are getting 2 tokens, one of which is going to have death touch, which can help have more things die, and you see where this is going. Yeah, Ogre Slumlord can help us fill the board in absolutely no time. And again, keep in mind that Chatterfang can utilize the tokens that we make to sacrifice them and take out our opponent's creatures, which helps us make even more creatures with something like this. Yeah, Ogre Slumlord can really help us take over the game in absolutely no time, and that's why it's the Golden Pig. But now let's talk about some other ways to really control the board and help us finish our opponents off with things like Taste of Death, Necrotic Hex, and Zot's Will. Taste of Death says, each player sacrifices 3 creatures, you create 3 food tokens. Now, sacrificing 3 creatures is usually a big deal for most players, but not for us. Again, we're going to have a lot of tiny tokens that we can just get rid of, and that's completely fine because you know what? We get them back with this. With those 3 food tokens we're making, we're also getting 3 squirrels. So even if we sacrifice 3 squirrels with this, we're just getting them back and then some. Speaking of which, let's talk about Necrotic Hex. It says each player sacrifices 6 creatures, you create 6 tap 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. Now, making each of our opponents sacrifice 6 creatures is usually going to be enough to pretty much wipe their entire boards. But again, with the number of tokens that we can generate, that's going to be absolutely no problem for us. So we sacrifice 6 of our tiny tokens, and then we get 6 zombies, and again on top of that, we are getting 6 squirrels. So we just gained even more creatures while basically wiping our opponent's boards. And then Zot's Will says choose one if you control a commander. As you cast a spell, you may choose both. Each opponent sacrifices a creature they control with the greatest power. And or exile all cards from all opponents' graveyards, then create X01 black throw creature tokens for X the greatest power among creature cards exiled this way. So with this, we can take out some of the biggest threats on the board, and on top of that, we can get a massive amount of tokens. Now, when it comes to finishing our opponents off, of course, we can just swing out with our token army, but we can also just, drain them. With things like Falconwrath Noble, Zulaport Cutthroat, and Poison Tip Archer. Falconwrath Noble says whenever it or another creature dies, target player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. And then Zulaport Cutthroat says whenever it or another creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. And then Poison Tip Archer actually counts all creatures, including our opponents, saying whenever another creature dies, each opponent loses 1 life. Regardless, again, with the number of tokens that we can generate with this deck, we can easily drain our opponents out with these. Especially since our commander can just, mass sacrifice a bunch of squirrels out of nowhere just by paying a black. So if one of our opponents is low and they're giving us problems, well, now they're just dead. And of course, we can just, like I mentioned before, swing out and kill our opponents with our massive army with things like Predatory Rampage, Overrun, and Drake Keeper. Predatory Rampage says, creatures you control get +3/+3 until end of turn. Each creature your opponents control blocks this turn to Fable. Overrun says, creature you control get +3/+3 and gain Trample until end of turn. So each of these are essentially going to quadruple the amount of damage that our tiny tokens put out. And then Drake Keeper helps us out in multiple ways. It says when enters the battlefield, create 2/1/1 green squirrel creature tokens. So again, thanks to Chatterfang, we're getting 4 little buddies instead. And then by paying 3 and a black, squirrels we control get +1/+0 and gain menace until end of turn. So this can pump our army and make them even harder to block. And when you're swinging with 20 or so squirrels, that can definitely be a death sentence. But now it's time for me to wrap things up and give you my final thoughts on Chatterfang Squirrel General. Chatterfang is a fantastic Squirrel Tribal commander, and it's pretty much exactly what Squirrel Tribal fans out there needed. Again, like I mentioned before, there really isn't all that much support for Squirrel Tribal, even with the new cards from Modern Horizons 2. But Chatterfang essentially makes it so that any spell that makes tokens, well, it can essentially be a Squirrel Tribal spell for this deck. So Chatterfang can help you flood the board in absolutely no time and help you control that board as well. Again, a huge thank you to my patrons for picking Chatterfang. I had a blast building this deck. And of course, if you're looking for the full deck list, make sure you check it out in the description below. If you're looking to play this deck, consider joining the amazing PlayEDH Discord. It's a great way to play Commander over webcam. In the description below, you'll find their Discord invite link as well as the tier that this deck has been approved at next to the deck list. So if you want to pick it up and play it as is, you can, and be sure to read their welcome information for more details. And with that, this show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thanks again, and have a good one.